Hi, welcome back to Examining Life, a life that's worth living. My name is Amanda. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Wisdom Wednesday. First, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed, and if you haven't already, please go ahead and click the subscribe button. And I also want to thank my patrons. I greatly appreciate your support, and thank you very much for your donations. I recently had a death in the family of a close family member, and of course, obviously, my channel's name is Examining Life, but today we will be examining death. And today's quote was said by Socrates in the Apology. Quote, "For to fear death, gentlemen, is only to think you are wise when you are not, for it is to think you know what you don't know. No one knows whether death is really the greatest blessing a man can have, but they fear that it is the greatest curse, as if they knew well. Surely this is the objectionable kind of ignorance, to think one knows what one does not know." First, I'm not convinced that people fear death because they think that they know what they don't know. On the contrary, I think it's feared because death is unknown. It's impossible to know what death is like, because obviously those who have died cannot tell us what it's like to be dead. And since we are alive, hence not dead, we cannot know what it's like to be dead. This is what makes the fear of death so great. I do agree that no one knows whether or not death is the greatest blessing or the greatest curse, and that it is feared as being the greatest curse, even when an individual who was living in immense pain dies, in which case death literally may have been the greatest blessing for that individual. Death may still be viewed as the greatest curse, rather than actually the source of the pain as being the greatest curse. I also think that death is viewed as being the greatest curse because it causes an immense change in one's state of being. Many people don't like change and fear branching out from what they are used to. I'm not suggesting here that people who are alive should branch out to attempt death. That is so not what I'm saying, but it's just the general change of the state of being itself and the general sense that most people don't like change, or that change can be uncomfortable, is what also contributes to the fear of death, because it's obviously a great change that occurs in one's life, or therefore a lack thereof, so that change creates a lot of fear. I'm simply stating that it's the change in one's being that contributes to the fear of death. Furthermore, not only is it that death itself is a concept that we cannot grasp, but other death-related factors contribute to the fear of death. This can include the reason for one's death and when one will die. Both of these are unknowns, although the reason for death may be known if, say, one is terminally sick. And obviously other causes of death can also become known if an autopsy is done. But this knowledge can only be known to individuals who are still alive, not to the person who did the dying. And presumably the person who did the dying is one who feared that death. In addition, there seems to be a spectrum of what is acceptable or a more wanted way of death. For example, most people, I would say, want to or envision themselves dying from old age. Dying from old age is, I would say, probably the most acceptable way to die because one's body has literally lived to its maximum. However, other causes of death, such as illness, a car accident, or even a murder, are far from glorified. That's not to say individuals whose lives are taken from these ways are not honored, but the method by which they died is viewed differently than, say, dying from old age. Also, not knowing when one will die greatly contributes to the fear of death. One can do either a conscious or subconscious probability calculation on the likeliness of him or her dying at any given moment. And the vast majority of these moments, we know that we are not going to die right then and there. yet we don't know when that moment will come. And there have obviously been occurrences in which the probability of dying was low, yet it has still occurred. Socrates doesn't mention anything about an afterlife in this quote, but if one believes in an afterlife, such as heaven or hell, this can also contribute to the fear of dying, because no one knows where he or she will end up after dying. An afterlife can also be scary for individuals who believe in reincarnation, because they don't know what they'll be in the next life. I think, though, that the concept of an afterlife is a coping mechanism for people who are still alive, which slightly helps to lessen the fear of death. For example, if one believes that good people go to heaven after death, and this individual views him or herself as a good person, then presumably they wouldn't have much to fear of dying, because they would have a strong inclination that they would go to heaven once they die. And this also lessens the fear of dying, because alternatives, such as going to hell, are much worse, which is what we are told. I have also wondered how much the rituals that are conducted after one dies are actually for the person who has died, or if they are actually for the people who are still alive. For example, the concepts of wakes and funerals. Are wakes and funerals for the person who has died, or for the people who knew that person when they were alive? I suppose both are reasons to hold these events, but I would say they are disguised as being only for the person who has passed. I'm not sure if many individuals actually acknowledge the selfish motives that living individuals have for conducting such rituals. But don't get me wrong here, just because something has a selfish motive does not mean that I'm suggesting that events such as wakes and funerals should not occur. I agree that an individual's life should be honored past the moment of death, and wakes and funerals are methods by which this is done. I also think that even if there are selfish motives, the fact that they are selfish does not make them inherently bad. For example, many extended family members and friends attend funerals, which, yes, honor and respect the person who has passed away, but this also serves as an emotional support system to the living family members. Knowing that there are others grieving over the loss of an individual helps with the coping, because you can go through that pain together. Furthermore, sharing stories and having general interactions with other people who knew the person that passed provide emotional support for the living individuals involved. In summary, although the thought of death is fearful, it should not be feared, because this fear is based solely on assumptions, not on actual knowledge, as it is impossible to know what being dead is like. On that note, I will leave you today with just make sure you live your best life. Thank you so much for watching this week's Wisdom Wednesday. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the concept of death. And do you fear death? Why or why not? And please remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Stay tuned every Wednesday. Thank you, and happy travels. Bye.